our AMA session. The purpose of this kind of AMA is just, more of a free flow of if you got any questions, here's Ash. He's here to answer all your questions. Hey James, I've been trying to form an opinion on AIs and stuff like that, right? Um so I'm working on something that I think it'll be kind of fun. So let me share my screen like to make it more fun. Um, yeah, so this is kind of like my view of what AI space is gonna look like in the future, by the way. Like I was looking at it and I was like, yeah, we have models before, and then we have LLMs, and then we have XRegs, right? Like XRegs meaning that, like graph regs, regs, and then memo regs, all that crazy stuff, right? Like I kind of put in like what they are and then in the next slide, but I was like, and then we've got like fine tuning LMs, like so people like you will fine tune it with like a very compared to like a large set of data sets. I'm thinking like maybe it's like a bit more small set of data sets, but most smaller set of data, and then we have like agents, and then like these are all then is going to interact with like applications and data stores and tools and humans, right? Like, I think that's what the future landscape is. So I'm thinking about it like agent, like specific workflows. Like now LangChain is not they don't just do LangChains anymore. They're doing LangGraphs, right? And then like, so people has two different meanings. I've been diving into like GraphRegs and all that kind of like stuff. And then I think Microsoft has a different meaning of GraphReg compared to other people calling it a GraphReg. Like if you talk to Microsoft, they're saying like, GraphReg is working, getting data out of graph database and then putting the LLM, then they call it a GraphReg. But if you ask a LangChain person, they would say GraphReg is LangGraph. So they have this new framework. They call it LangGraph, right? And basically, it's more like now I have this, agentic workflow, and LangChain just terrible at it, coding that stuff because there's a lot of like things you need to call and keeping the memories and all that. So like they were like basically saying, you know what, this looks like a graph. Let's turn that into a graph and then with nodes and edge and all that kind of stuff. And that's called LangGraph. It makes it easy for people trying to put all this crazy stuff like in here together. So it will interact with tools, it will interact with services, it will interact with like all that kind of stuff, right? So I was thinking, right? And then since I was doing the like how I was did the masterclass and I was drawing all these diagrams and graphs for Benthos or for Redpanda Connect, I was like, aren't we just doing the same thing? Can we just turn like Redpanda Connect into something like LangGraph, and then it will just look because if you take a look at it, it has interactions with tools, it has endpoints to services APIs, like it's basically what it's trying to do. It's trying to replicate what we did before, like in like a couple of years ago, right? And but it adds a little bit of like interacting with LMs and all that kind of stuff, right? I was thinking like, isn't that the same thing? I want to get your opinion on it, like making sure I'm not like imagining things.
What would happen if you put a Firehose to it? Like, you said like connect X to my S3 bucket. Because it like what I always envisioned is we've got an AI that looks at the docs for Redpanda Connect, right? So we're already building models on that.
Uh-huh.
But like the ultimate end goal for that is you be able to like I guess kind of like what these phone AIs are trying to do, where they interact with all the different apps on the phone. So we'd have something that would be kind of like that for Redpanda Connect. We could say like, "Hey, Connect, can you take all of Reddit as a fire hose and add my name in the place of Elon Musk, and then write that data to my S3 bucket in tar.gzip format." And what it will be able to do is say, okay, yeah, I know the Redpanda Connect um, config language for that, and then just kind of like do it for you.
Uh-huh.
And
So that's an
if it's
agent.
if it's an AI, it might be smart enough to say like, oh, hey, is that in JSON format in the tar.gzip, or is it something else? And then it would help you kind of like fill in the blanks and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, it's basically the smart thing is being able to take your mushy language and turn it into a thing On like phones, I'm guessing it's hooking into like internal APIs that they've been trained to look at. With like apps and stuff, you've got like a list of actions it can do. Whereas for us, we've got the config language that it would be trained on. And then I can finally stop writing YAML and we can just use the AI. But I mean, you couldn't have like an AI just do the fire hose itself. Like if you imagine you had like the smartest AI on the planet, just like you couldn't tell me, hey, get the fire hose of X and write it into Discord. I would then have to open up X on like a browser and then like manually go and like get all these. I've understood your request,
Right.
but I'm gonna have to go in. I'm still gonna have to like manually figure out like, oh, what are all these messages and like copy the text and bring it over. Like that's the bit that is the difficult part for the AI. But getting the right tool and then deploying it and doing that bit, you can definitely do that. I kind of hope we get there, to be honest, because I feel like one of the most exhausting processes of my day is reading social media. And it would be great if I could just have an AI digest all that and I could just be like, hey, what should I be terrified about today? And it's already hooked all the various data feeds, all the sources and syncs, all the different protocols, and digested all of that for me. And then I just get the innocent aggregate of that data freshly digested. It'll be expensive though, is the only thing. It'll be very expensive.
Yeah, how many tokens like would that be then? Like if we're thinking about getting, well, depending on how many social medias you're following.
Be a lot, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't be able to fit. You can't fit it on the memory of a disk. That's why we have to have all these crazy systems. So you'd have to have an AI that surpasses, because it's gonna amplify the data storage a few orders of magnitude because it's obviously not going to be the most. Well, actually, maybe it would be more efficient. Don't know, actually. Yeah, I think they would like an AI person would probably argue that it would be more efficient to store all that data in an AI than just as serialized data on disk. So maybe that would actually be an optimization. But my
What
assumption
is
is it'd
it?
be crazy expensive
Like I thought that would be expensive. Like what do they think it's going to be more cost effective? I'm just curious.
because if you think like I guess in my brain I've stored all the Pokemon names, and the like if you cut that bit of my brain out and you measured like how much actual data storage do we have here, and like until if you convert it into like bits of data, how much storage you actually have. I think basically the argument is that because my brain's like a brain is doing clever things about associations and relations between all those different connections. So you're not actually storing the literal text of each Pokemon name. What you're doing is you've got basically some way of reproducing the name from these relations in your head. So the storage could be more efficient. Like it would be more efficient than having like a spreadsheet of Pokemon name to like a JPEG of what it looks like, and all these other bits of information. Like you imagine all the things that would you associate it with the name of something, like a car model. You've got all this information that you've stored. The way that that's stored is more efficient than like the reproducing it for every single car. Because you
I
might you
see.
might remember that this car's similar to this one, and they've kind of like shared a section of the neural net. So I think they often say that like storing certain pieces of information is more efficient in a neural network because when you're training, you're actually destroying the info. You're preserving the relationships that
Right.
info kind of all has baked into it, but you're destroying the original info itself. Like our memories aren't good, for example. Like we misremember and we have to kind of like rediscover memories over time because we've stored them in a more efficient way. But it's destructive. But if all you wanted to get out of it was list me all the green Pokemon, like I could do that. I could probably do that. But I haven't actually stored all that info in my head. Um,
So
so
I mean
I don't know. Maybe it would be cheap. I don't know.
that's an interesting thought because does that mean that in the future, like in the future, near future, that it feels like it's more like fine tuning, right? Like now I'm just fine tuning maybe like things I learned today, like Pokemons, like the relations and everything, I was kind of getting it from a database, but now I'm retraining it every day, like daily. And then having a new models gets published, a new retrain and fine-tune models and push that like daily. So I get a new set of that. So I don't have to always feed in new information into it, right? Would that be something? I don't know. I feel like something that's doable. I mean, it's gonna take a long time to implement it, but I feel like it's doable. It's
Yeah.
like somehow we would run it, and it would be more efficient in terms of now I don't have to send in so many tokens into the LLMs, and then it's because it already knows from what it says, right? Right, what you're
Yeah,
saying.
you're just kind of like skimming off the top of the info.
Yep.
I don't feel like I could basically say yes, that's possible right now, but I feel like I'm making promises to people. I've got no association with AI research right now, so I don't think it's my place to say. But they can definitely do that. They can figure
Yeah.
it out.
Right.
I will say on their behalf.
Hey James, what do you
I do
think?
have lots of work.
Yeah. Thanks, Ash. So like James, do you like what's your opinion on it? Like you've been very quiet, but I think you have a lot to
Yeah,
say.
you know what? I've been reading a lot about Paulside over the last couple of days. Obviously, they had that huge investment this week, and they're a customer of ours. I'm just interested to hear what they do, and it's really interesting to hear that they are using like LLMs, but they're also building their own models, like using reinforcement learning to improve that developer experience. So they're like Copilot competitor, if you want to call it that, right? So it's all about generating code. And where they want to get to is, at the moment, they say developer first, AI assisted. They want to be AI assisted the other way around, right? AI first, developer assisted, which I think is pretty cool. But they're using Redpanda to train the model, so it's all about collecting events and updating the models in real time, which I think is pretty cool. A really cool use case.
Is that like a normal models, like the traditional models, or is it like a LLM model that they're training?
Yeah, they don't talk too much about it. There's some blog posts on their website which is pretty interesting. So they're using I'm just trying to find it now. They have a model called Malibu, which is trained using reinforcement learning and code execution feedback. It doesn't really say what kind of model that is. I'm assuming it's like PyTorch or something like that, right? But I was thinking like today, if you built a model like that, to say as part of this competition, if you built your own model in PyTorch, could you call it from Redpanda Connect? You probably could, right? Because you can call out to Python on the command line, so there's no reason why you couldn't.
Yeah.
I wonder if that would be a really cool idea to build a project around that.
Yeah, maybe we can do that. Like, yeah, I think just using like a Python connector, right? Like I think
We have a Python processor, right?
yeah,
So yeah, I wonder if that would be like a cool idea.
that would be fun.
And then you can call custom models in Redpanda Connect.
Yeah,
And
we've
have
never had an example on that, right? That would be cool.
Yeah.
Well, any thoughts on like anybody on the call, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot it, but we're just chatting. So Ramazan says, do we really need to put Redpanda Connect in our project? Can we put Redpanda Connect aside? Like what's the difference between aside and into your project? But so you do have to have Redpanda Connect as part of the project. Like, if it's doing some data ingestions or, doing some kind of like, data, using it to call LLMs and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you gotta have Redpanda Connect related to what you're building. So I hope that answers your question. Amazon does this project needs to involve AI? Yes, it has to do something to do with AI. So we try to make it open book. So as long as you can kind of tell us what is intelligent about your programs, just yeah. So definitely it has to be in some respects of AIs.
I can't speak for the other judges, but if I see evolutionary algorithms, then I will consider that AI. It's got an honorary place.
There you go. There you go. So you have Ash's words here. I'm gonna cut it into highlights so he can never say no. Right. So definitely this hackathon had AI, but require only mention Redpanda Connect and data science. So does it mean that we need to use Redpanda to use with AI for our use case? Well, I mean, use Redpanda to use with AI. Well, as long as you build something that's related to AI, if you're using Redpanda Connect to help you, getting ready for your data sets, obviously that's workable. Like from my perspective, it's okay. But it all depends on our judges. Like
I don't think we're going to knock points off for people not storing the data in a Redpanda topic. So as long as you're using Redpanda Connect to do the orchestration bits, that's really that's the bit that we need. Because the implication there is if you wanted to then dump that data into Redpanda as well, you could just do that, but you don't have to have it as part of your project.
Exactly. What is the motive for Redpanda to replace Kafka? Is this a question? An AI hackathon related question? Well, we needed something more. I'll let James answer that. James, why don't you take the motive of why we want to use Redpanda?
Okay, this is more of a general question, right? It's the original sort of seed for building Redpanda was related to performance. So actually, when Alex did write, our CEO Alex wrote the original and the first line of code for Redpanda, it was to solve a problem, and that was a performance-based problem where he was trying to scale Kafka to a point where he could get the performance he needed in terms of latency. And just couldn't do it. So he set out to write his own streaming data platform, and that's what has become Redpanda. So the original requirements were around performance. So Redpanda is built for high throughput and low latency. So you're looking at sort of 10x better performance than Kafka. And to do that, we've employed various mechanisms, right? For one, it's written in C++, so a lot faster. Has better access to the underlying operating system and hardware, so we can control and bypass things like page cache, have better control over the disks and what we're doing there. Plus, if you want to really nerd out, go and read about C Star. C Star is a super interesting C++ framework. And Redpanda is built on C Star, so that has some primitives around how we pin application threads to cores, how we control the network and things like that. So again, super low level, but really interesting sort of performance-based information if you wanted to sort of read about how Redpanda has been built. So that's really the motive for Redpanda to replace Kafka. And then as we've matured as a company, that's changed into lots of other things like Connect, like cloud, like things like tiered storage, backup, disaster recovery, all of these enterprisey type of things, right? So again, that's where we're sort of adding value on top of the Kafka API, but not being Kafka.
That's awesome. Thanks. So William has a question about if he takes time to learn Redpanda Connect, how much of that will he be able to reuse on a Kafka project from 0 to 100? My opinion is 100. I don't know about what you two thinks.
100. Kafka Connect is separate to Redpanda Connect is separate to Kafka, but it has tight integration in terms of inputs and outputs, right? So you can use that against Redpanda, you can use that against Kafka, Confluent, anything you like, right? Because it's Kafka API based.
Yep, 100%. So yeah, so basically just learn it. You're going to come in very handy when you work with Kafka.
As a funny aside, obviously everyone always gets pinged on LinkedIn, right, by recruiters. I had a message from a recruiter this week asking for Bentos skills. Well, first time, Redpanda Connect, and they actually said Redpanda Connect as well, which is even better. So that was cool.
That is so cool. Like when I go into Reddit, like Reddit has like two different like data engineering specific subreddit, right? Kafka. And for some reason, the people in subreddit of the Kafka, like they hate me. Whenever I post things, they'll just delete my stuff right away. Like because I use Redpanda Christina as my like thing, and I think that's why they hated me.
Yeah, pretty on the nose.
Yeah. And then like data engineering, so they're a lot more acceptable. And then if you ask the questions about like, what is a better like replacement for Kafka Connect and all that kind of stuff, Benthos shows up a lot of times when you're in that specific subreddit that people are talking about it. They're like, hey, if you hate how hard it is to set up Kafka Connect, you should try Benthos. And like
I mean that's historically the only way that people found out about it because my marketing budget was 0 for like 5 years. So the only like we grew by word of mouth, which means like on forums and conversations, it's usually being compared to other tools. So somebody will say, I'm having a really bad time with X. Somebody will say, use this instead. And that's how it goes around. I'm kind of offended that I didn't get that job advert.
So my name is Eric Agri, of course. I'm kind of like a lead data engineer in one of the pharma companies here in Budapest. So I've been using Kafka for like so long. So I jumped into this challenge just recently, and I'm quite excited that I'm going to be playing with Redpanda to actually see the benefits. But I already have like some Kafka projects that I've built. So what I'm actually thinking is, what do you think? Will it kind of like be easy for somebody to just plug out Kafka and put it Redpanda? So because I already have like a cybersecurity kind of demo project I built in a class I was kind of like teaching. So I'm thinking about submitting it for this hackathon, but I'm thinking, is there kind of like a way in which, for example, I have like an existing Kafka project, I could just shift out Kafka and put in Redpanda. So does that work? Have you tried it before? Any of you?
I mean, from a technical perspective, 100% that would work. But you can treat Redpanda as a drop-in replacement for Kafka. So you could take Kafka out and put Redpanda in. That's not a problem. The APIs are completely compatible, so you wouldn't have any problems there. In terms of this competition, though, what we're looking for is something AI-based and also something with Redpanda Connect. So you could take your project and use it as a base for sure, and then maybe modify it by switching out Redpanda instead of Kafka, but then maybe changing some of the cyber security stuff to run in Redpanda Connect. That would be a good idea and a good use case.
Okay. So, and maybe the final one. So if I'm to start, I'm kind of very busy. So I'm kind of asking, what is because I see that these lessons are not kind of like in the Redpanda University. I don't think they are arranged in kind of like an order that you have to take one after the other. So if you want to like somebody that is very new to Redpanda, so and maybe the person just opened the Redpanda University, is there any kind of sequence you kind of like advise on how the person should take the courses in the Redpanda University?
So I'll take that. So for university, I don't think we have any course on Redpanda Connect yet because we're still building it. So there is one. I'm going to put it in the chat. So this is one masterclass that we run last week. And that one is all about Redpanda Connect. So you can basically learn Redpanda Connect like in this masterclass. And it also has like a lab to it. So you can actually like test out your, it's kind of in the LeetCode style. So you can kind of test how you can write the whole like pipeline and all that kind of stuff, like how you're gonna assemble a Redpanda Connect together, right? So you can kind of work on it. Like that's kind of my advice for we'll figure it out. So William has a question. What are the main use case for data streaming? I work at 14 software companies and never use data streaming. They use queuing like AWS, SQS pops up like, yeah, it's similar like that. But I'll let Ash, it's your turn. Take this question.
Yeah, go on. Basically, you imagine the first stage on the journey is you've got data floating around in a company. So, I mean, every company is going to have some technical data that they're going to want to share across either various products that are technical, so code that you're writing uses data in a database, or you might also have people who want to access that data, so they want to see spreadsheets of, some random bits of information that your services are growing. That's what we would call the sort of batch world, where because of the volume of the data, it's not a big deal for it to exist in a database and only a database. And when new data is coming in, you can just write it at the database straight off. If somebody asks for a spreadsheet, you can just export it there and then. And everybody's happy, everybody's chill. You don't need any more technical complexity than that. So everything kind of works in this batch mindset. Even when the volumes get higher, you can still probably live in a batch world where, imagine you've got all this data slowly getting dumped into your database, and you need to keep some other data store up to date with the last 24 hours worth of information. So what you might say is, okay, well, on a 24-hour schedule, I'm going to export all the data in my database and write it into, I mean, it could still be spreadsheets, I don't know, but you could be dumping it into an S3 bucket to share with another team or another company, that kind of thing. And the idea is that as long as it doesn't take too long to do that transfer and you're okay doing it as like a manual process, then everything's fine. And again, this is in the batch world. So it's a batch job. You trigger it. You could trigger it on intervals. You could do it manually by pushing a button. Once you get to the point where either the systems that you're talking about here, where data exists in one place, but then it also needs to end up somewhere else, or it needs to reach somebody else. Once you're in a world where that needs to happen instantaneously, like we'd call that real time, but essentially if it needs to happen within seconds or minutes, or it could be milliseconds, it could be nanoseconds, I don't know. You are now outside of the scope of batch systems. You can't really do that anymore as a manual process once the data reaches a certain volume. The other problem is, even if you don't need it in real time, so if you could just have these other services update every like 24 hours or so, the problem with a lot of those systems is eventually it gets to the point where the size of the data is so much that it takes more than that cadence to send the data out. So imagine if you need to keep data up to date every 24 hours, but it takes more than 24 hours to transfer all of that data over. Once you're in that space, you're in a lot of trouble. Even if you're in, if it takes you an hour, you're still kind of in trouble there, because if things don't go well, you might have to work weekends, you might have to work evenings, you might have to wake up at 3 a.m. and just make sure that those systems all end up in the right state. So basically, people will eventually reach streaming because one of those realities will occur where you have this data coming in at some volume, some speed, and it needs to end up somewhere else at a point where we're either needing to do it constantly so that we're not triggering these batch jobs. We need to just be doing it as it comes, like a hot potato. We need to get it moved as quickly as possible because we don't want like a backlog. We don't want a massive sack of hot potatoes. Or the need for that data to be delivered somewhere quickly has now occurred, and you can no longer just do it. You can't rely on the fact that you're going to be there to trigger those systems. And the problem is, if you sleepwalk into that scenario, I mean, it's perfectly reasonable if you don't have a need for streaming to just not have a streaming system. It's complexity on your infrastructure. You're going to have to learn all these new tools. There's lots of these new paradigms that you can have to get familiar with. But the problem is, a lot of companies do these batch jobs, and they are sleepwalking into a scenario where eventually they're going to need to do something like streaming. And if you end up in a scenario where you're so preoccupied with bailing yourself out with batch jobs that now take a long time or need to be constantly running because you need that real time. I mean, I've seen organizations, for example, where it takes an hour to synchronize data from one place to another, and they are asked to have data up to date within the hour. So they will basically just be sat there as part of their day job, triggering that process over and over and over again. And then some of them think they're being clever by writing a script that will just do it automatically. But the idea is, if you're in this real-time world now, You need to have an answer for things like what happens when stuff stops, what happens if things go wrong, and where does the data actually exist in those scenarios, and what's your recovery scenario? Because in a batch world, it's simple. You just say, I'll run things again if it failed. But in the streaming world, if things have to be happening constantly and they're running 24/7, then now you want them to be automatic. You want those recoveries to ideally be as hands-off as possible. And at worst, you want the process to be efficient. So, I mean, it's definitely, I would say that it used to be that streaming was extremely niche. But as more companies get more and more data, the reason why streaming is suddenly becoming more and more commonplace in a lot of these companies, I don't necessarily think it's that people are seeing, huge value that wasn't there before. It's just they used to be able to capture that value with batch jobs and manual processes. And that's not really possible anymore with the volumes that people are seeing. And also, I mean, the streaming tools are getting a lot better. For example, our tools are getting really good. And it makes all of this stuff a lot easier and cheaper. But yeah, there's still obviously a lot of places where you just don't need it. If you don't have volumes or a need for real-time stuff at that level, then you just don't need it. I mean, you can always find some fun projects to do if you're looking for an excuse.
Hope that answers your question, William. Any feedback, just let us know.
I'm hyper aware that I just waffled for like 10 minutes because I'm trying to avoid my work.
That's like the whole point. No.
Yeah, that's a good paraphrase. Volume plus real time.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
I've actually started checking other course, but not that one in particular. So
yeah. So this one is a masterclass. I didn't put it in because the way that we run masterclass is that you kind of have to learn the skill, and we don't, like in university we have a huge long explanations of how things work. But in masterclass it was delivered by in a more of a conversational way. So you don't get all that additional information if you're doing masterclass when you look at the lab itself, right? So that's the only difference. Yeah, so I would look at the Connect one because that would be more relevant to what you'll be building.
I think I have some time now, so I'm going to be giving this evening to it. So
awesome. Yep.
And see how I can upgrade my cybersecurity. It has AI, so I'm using OpenAI for the embeddings. So it's kind of like RAC. So, but in this case, I'm kind of reading events like from logs, system logs, and converting them to embedding, storing them in another system called OpenSearch. So
so you're putting them into a vector database.
Yes, like I'm storing them into a vector database, and I also have a React front end as well. So it's interesting. So the solution I'm going to build, can I also present it on my channel?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
You can present in the channel, and then when you submit your submission, just make sure you're including your channel's video URL so we can look at it.
Yeah. I'm already getting too excited. I don't know why.
I'm excited too. Cool. All right, we're at that time. Thank you so much for participating in our AMA, and thank you to Ash and James for helping out answer questions. I know you've been very super helpful. Thank you all. So I will see you next week. All right.
Cheers, everyone. Happy hacking.
Happy hacking. Yes.